We're back, baby. It's a Horns Up Talking Texas podcast. Fisher DeSopoulos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Crider, the Quan, Cosby. We're changing it up again. Last week we did it a little differently here. Of course, sorry, I almost jumped into. Get your horns up, guys, please. Thank you. We did a little differently last year. We had a recruit on, Dorian Brew, 5-star recruit corner. He was awesome, and that was courtesy of our dear friend Chimdi Chekwa, who is a 4-year starter from Ohio State, covers the Buckeyes, believe in Buckeyes, also a former NFL vet. He sent him over, and we're like, you know what, Chimdi, we all talk college football. You're great at talking college football. We're great at it. We love it. Let's get you on. Let's talk a little college ball. So, Chimdi Chekwa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, of course, man. A lot going on in college football. It never stops. Yep. Transfer portal is kind of done. Right now, we got the Senior Bowl going on, which I want to talk a little bit about because the NFL draft is about to be the number one thing in all of football once the Super Bowl is over next Sunday. What were either of your guys' experience, if you had any, at the Senior Bowl? And what do you guys think that does for NFL draft prospects? Because from our perspective right now, after day one, day two guys in the Texas Longhorn fronts that are kicking ass are Tavondre Sweat at defensive tackle and Christian Jones at right tackle. He was our starter as a senior. So both those guys are really dominating over there. So I'd love to get both your guys' maybe perspectives and opinions on the Senior Bowl. Start with you, Q, and then go to you, Chimdi.
Man, I tell you, the Senior Bowl first is Mobile. That's the first time I've ever been there, so that was always something. And but man, I went at a cool time because a lot of good dudes, Pat White, a lot of the USC guys, that we had played against, just competing on that level with senior folks, people who get it. It was a lot of fun. I will say that there was the only negative because it's two of them. Two of the worst teams usually are the coaching staff. So they're sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're not. We had the Bengals, who I end up going to, so they certainly like something they saw at the Senior Bowl, and then two. And I think Ohio State's a Nike school too, right?
Yeah.
Two, our gear at the time, Under Armour was trying to get in football, and they give you the gear and they force you to wear at the time Under Armour. My feet have never hurt so damn bad as a receiver and those Under Armour shoes were garbage. Now, again, they've come a long way since 2009 Senior Bowl, but it's man, you think about it, is ways to compete. I think the one-on-ones are more important even than the games because it's just you're switching quarterbacks every other freaking series. It's no consistency from a game standpoint, but as you can see with our guys there, Christians making them some money, T Sweat, we knew was going to do really well. That those one-on-ones is what everybody's showing is on the NFL level when you're going against some more than likely a decent amount of dudes who are going to play on that level. It's good to go have a good showing. Now, glass half empty, you go there and lay an egg, it's not going to work itself out either. So you have to go compete, and it's cool that they have that game invitation only that you can go do that.
Love that, Chimdi.
Yeah, so I actually didn't go to the Senior Bowl. So I got the invite, but I dislocated my wrist my last game in the Sugar Bowl against Arkansas in college. So I took that opportunity to continue to do rehab. I think I had another second surgery lined up around that time, so I didn't even go do like interviews and stuff like that. But I do remember, and missing out on the opportunity. We had a lot of corners my draft year. Guys like Pat Peterson, Richard Sherman. It was like 10 or 12 of us. And the guys who went to the Senior Bowl and performed really moved up because, at some point we could take either guy. But we saw this guy line up in one-on-ones and do well. So we're going to pick him. And, a guy like Sherman who went, I think, in the 5th round, and he was at the Senior Bowl. I'm not sure he had honestly, I'm not sure he had a great Senior Bowl. So it goes both ways. I think it's an opportunity for coaches, more so than the combine. Coaches can actually go there and see you compete one-on-one. Like, can I win? And they also get an opportunity to potentially interview you and get to know how much knowledge do you have. And I think guys who have a good showing at the Senior Bowl or any of those, all-star type games, do a lot for themselves during that draft process.
Dude, I want to piggyback on that. for me, and I overthink stuff. So the combine to me is running the 40. It's a bunch of non-football stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I appreciate about the Senior Bowl was we're competing. You're doing one-on-ones. You're running routes. You're going through the tree. You're processing plays. And last but not least, what you touched on was that conversation. I got to know a lot of dudes. We you go there, you do your on the field stuff. You go back to the hotel. You're pretty much in. You're getting extra interviews because you got the two teams that are coaching, but clearly the other the other folks are there. And I had a lot of conversations with those folks during that time that came into play when it came down to really choosing a team and all that stuff. So that's right on. So it's more FaceTime that you can get and create. But the biggest thing was you're playing football. You're not running down on time. You're not doing the L drill that I never did as a receiver. You're truly going out there and catching balls and taking care of business.
Do you guys feel like some players might have been putting on a show just to kind of show off their personality a little more? Like we say that like when Hard Knocks comes to a team, maybe those guys are putting on more of a show because the cameras are on. They want people to see them in a different way. Do you think that's maybe the case of the Senior Bowl with some guys with a bunch of coaches, and they're trying to look like they're, something that maybe they aren't?
I mean, it's hard to do. Like at some point, you got to line up and play football. I think
Right.
there's something to you're being evaluated, right? So
yeah,
some guys are trying to make sure that they represent themselves. I remember going into and I didn't go to the Senior Bowl, but just during that process, I made sure that I was talking to some of my college coaches, going through different types of defenses. So I was prepared regardless of how the interview went, that I could go draw up everybody on the defense and know and because part of my scouting was that I was a guy who really understood a lot of I could slide inside and that. So I wanted to be able to really show that if they were expecting it. So I think, some guys may really prep for that part of it so that they can, especially if you're a linebacker, right? You want to be able to impress in interviews. But I mean, the show part of it, you could put on the show as much as you want. When you line up in one-on-ones, man, it's me versus you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about both of our programs now. I'm going to ask a really.
I want to say something to Nick's question because
thank you.
At the Senior Bowl, not so much. Now, clearly, Chimdi's a smart dude. We didn't really have to put on a show, but if there's questionable things about your character that you wanted to show a different light, I could see some dudes, doing a little bit extra. Trying to get a few more, get a little bit more FaceTime to show that side of them. And I'll tell you a funny thing that happened at the combine, not the Senior Bowl, was we're in line where you're pretty much getting taken down the line and measured like a piece of meat. And I saw some dudes doing push-ups trying to get a vein to pop out. So you see a little bit more of stuff like that that's goofy than I necessarily saw at the Senior Bowl when you're playing football. That's why I laugh about the combine. You're in Indianapolis, you're going on a little bit different turf versus back home and all the rest. And so I saw more of a show at the combine than I did at the Senior Bowl, where you're just playing ball and having interviews. So that does happen, but not necessarily at the spot you talked about.
The combine is all show. Right?
It's all show, bro.
I was one of those dudes doing push-ups.
Let's be honest.
I drank a gallon of water. I did my body fat test. No, before that. Before I weighed in, I drank a gallon of water to add a couple pounds. Stepped off the scale, and then right after you do that, you're supposed to do your body fat. Well, I went straight to the restroom. They're like, "Hey, go! No, I gotta go to the restroom. I gotta get rid of all of it. Now let me go do my body fat test." It's like the combine is it's not football. You prep all this time to perform
like a beauty pageant.
Yeah, then you finish, and then you realize, now I gotta go play football. Now let me actually prepare for a real football season. So
yeah, it sounds more like Miss Universe beauty pageant, right?
No, bro. Hey, that portion of it, I mean, you're sitting there in line and they're measuring the one cat. You have about 1,500 dudes out there, including owner. That is the one thing, too, which is very weird. The owners actually go to that and when they're doing the measuring. And then you walk down this aisle of folks in your tights, and it is there's some similarities. There's some other similarities, too, that we could talk about and look like. But nah, man, you're right. That's all show, man. It really is.
Yeah, Chimdi, what you ran a 4.38? I saw at your combine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cast on, man.
The cast on. Yeah, that's 4.38's quick enough to be an Oakland Raider, bro. That's how it is, man.
Right. They like
you see 4.38. All right, yeah, we'll take that guy.
That's funny because right after I ran it, so Hugh Jackson was the coach that year.
Yeah.
Right after I ran it, I looked up at Hugh, and he gave me like a thumbs up, and I was like, okay, I know. I know worst case scenario, the Raiders gonna grab me.
That's awesome, man. All right, but our programs, you guys lost to Michigan, Chimdi, in a really close one. But you guys retool on, you guys retool at the quarterback spot. But with everything going on with Ryan Day and all the flack he continuously gets, he goes out and he retains guys that we thought he was not going to be able to retain. Like you guys bring in Judkins as well from Ole Miss, and you retain Henderson, which, if you really think about it in a nutshell, with both guys having NFL aspirations, is kind of crazy, right? Like they're going to be battling for carries. So you guys retain a lot of guys, and you retool at the quarterback position and running back position. We retain a lot of guys. We hit the highest heights we've hit probably since Q was there or close to, like the year after. So both these programs, you guys still on the up. We're on the up. Are these? This is a heavy hitting Kool-Aid question. I'm just forewarning y'all. Are these the two best programs heading into the 2024 season in college football with Georgia? We lost you, Q.
Yeah.
Q, you're muted.
You go, Chim, while Q figures out his mic.
I would say yes. I think Saban stepping down really shifted the landscape. And honestly, I think initially when it happened, I said probably the biggest beneficiaries would be Texas, probably Florida State, depending on what their situation is. In Georgia, right? Obviously, Georgia has been at the top of the conference, and the one team they just can't beat. It doesn't matter how good they are that year. They just can't be. It's like Alabama had mind control over them. They just couldn't beat them. But Texas is in a spot where when I look at Ohio State, and I look at another school that's comparable in terms of the alumni, the size, and just the resources for real. At the end of the day, Texas is that school. It almost didn't make sense to me, that they hadn't maintained that level for so long. But I think where they're at now, it's really, they're really in prime position to be in that spot, to kind of walk into that. Depending on what the board can do and salvaging what's left at Alabama, I think they're in prime position to be top 2 in the SEC. They still got to do it, but in terms of the coaching, the talent that exists, and if I'm a high school or a college kid who's looking to transfer, and I'm in the South, Texas would be at the top of my list. And I train a lot of I train cornerbacks, I train defensive backs, and obviously I want kids to go to Ohio State, but I know I've been in that position, so I make sure that they do their due diligence and they're looking at every school, and at a minimum, list Texas as one of your schools, because even if you got an offer from Texas, the other schools that's a real competitor, right? That's someone that if you're trying to maximize your NIL opportunity, well, Texas is one that's going to drive the price up, I would say. So
yeah,
I do think so. So I'm interested to see. There's a big game against Michigan. I'm interested to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. That's something I never even thought of, is the driving up the price, and kind of like in baseball where they leak news that they're talking to a free agent, right, just so another team can up their price. But I guess that's beneficial for a high school recruit as well, saying, okay, you know what, I have offers from Texas and Bama and Georgia. What does USC got for me? What does Ohio State got for me? So it's a good point,
bro. If you pay attention to social media, these kids are great at it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and I laugh because essentially, this recruit hit me up not too long ago. I actually am not very good at following recruiting, but this recruit hit me up. He's like, hey, what do I need to do here? So I hit up Huff and I talked to a couple of dudes over there. I was like, hey, what are their next steps? And it blew my mind when he was like, hey, tell them to just hit them up in their DMs. And I'm like, what? DMs? Like Instagram or Twitter? And he's like, that's one of the best ways to kind of get, in touch with some of the recruiting guys or the coaches. So when someone put it out there Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida, all those schools offer me, yeah, that's what they do. Truth be told, coach has been doing it for the longest. Their agents will leak that in a second. Oh, and be lying half the time. Oh, yeah, Texas reached out, Ohio State reached out, Michigan, USC reached out. And so he's right on with the NIL world and what's happening. And I'm going to tell you, the reason I put Ohio State and Texas as two of the probably either want to be one or the other as far as top. Now, Ohio State lost a lot with Harrison and stuff like that, but they kept their coach. Thank God, because a lot of folks, I say pretty damn good job other than beating Michigan the last few years. But Alabama, Saban being gone, you got to call a spade a spade. That's a big deal to everybody. And we've been beneficiaries of it. Michigan's coach, Harbaugh, going to the league. I mean, you're talking about the defending national champion. USC's fell off. When you think about other blue bloods, when you look across the landscape of true blue bloods, you got Georgia, they have their same coach. Texas has their same coach. Alabama has their same coach. So just by that alone, I think you're going to go into this season and they'll probably be certainly in the top 5, probably top 3. And then with them having their same coach, there's no such thing as not dealing with the portal at this point. It's a S show and it is what it is. But having that consistency and those pieces in place, they were beneficiaries from having their same coach. And I know Ohio State got a big quarterback. We got half of Alabama's team, and Georgia, quite frankly, didn't really need anybody, so they had what they needed. But yeah, man, it's cool for us to be back in that mix. It's a football as we know it. You talk about NIL and the folks, the devil's advocates talking about, oh, what about the small dudes? Football is a blue blood sport. Washington, kudos to them for the year that they had with a very veteran team, but football is a blue blood sport, and certainly those schools are going to be in the mix, especially when they have the consistency and the good pieces in place, like your head coach, of course.
I want to quickly ask you guys something, just very quick on the topic of recruiting. Last week we had Dorian Brew, Chimney, you're really familiar with him. And we were asking him the things that he liked most about all the schools that he's been visiting: Texas, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. And the thing that just kept on being constant was position coaches. He goes, I just have a really good relationship with Ohio State's position coach. I have a really good relationship with Texas's position coach, Gideon. For you guys, and for guys who are recruiting, is that, I really didn't realize how big of a factor that is. I mean, obviously it's the guy who's molding you your whole career, but is that the number one biggest thing when going to a school, is having a relationship with that guy, even over the head coach?
So for me, it depends. So for me, Jim Tressel was a big reason why, outside of all other reasons to commit to Ohio State, Jim Tressel was a big reason why I committed to Ohio State. Interestingly enough, Urban Meyer was at Florida at that time. So I lived in Central Florida. I grew up in Louisiana, but I lived in Central Florida through high school. And University of Florida was about an hour and a half drive from my house. So I went to every game, every Florida game on the weekend. But I was not interested in going to play for Urban Meyer at that time. But I was interested in playing for Tressel. And Tressel and the staff underneath him all kind of had similar personalities. And I think just who I was, they kind of fit my personality. So coaches matter a lot. Because at the end of the day, you're a young kid leaving your house, right? The next person, the closest parent at that point is really going to be the coach. And I think, in today's college football, where coaches are shifting, players are following them, etc. Really that communication kind of happens with that coach that's recruiting you. And they're going to be the extension of the university, or how you feel about the university. And I think, we see it. We got the kid Caleb Downs, the safety from Bama, and I think the relationship he built with Tim Walton, even before he committed to Alabama, is what. There's other factors as well, but it's what made him feel comfortable leaving. I think he's from Georgia to come up to Ohio the next year. So those relationships are important, and they're not just important initially getting the recruit. Because of the transfer portal, you got to at least maintain that relationship somewhat, because if a coach leaves, that recruit now has to make a decision. Do I stay here, or do I go, play for that coach who I really like, but he came second place before?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely puts the emphasis on the first go around, right? And then maintaining that relationship where before, if you didn't get the guy, you didn't get the guy. And then it's kind of like tough luck, right? Moving on to the next class. But holding on to that relationship and being there when he announces on social media that he's going to transfer, or just, tells Hayes Fawcett, right? And then, he's back in the portal. That coach who had the relationship from the recruiting cycle before gets back in there, and it makes a huge difference. I do want to ask, was it that you were so close to the University of Florida, like that it didn't have the same allure as someone else in the Southeast that saw them winning? Or was it the style of coaching, like that you had heard things about with Urban, who's been on your show, and that's one of y'all's best episodes, he was so candid about how he doesn't want to get back into, college football now because he doesn't want to have to deal with the recruiting right now. Right. But it's interesting, right? Because they won. And so
or the guys in the roster. Sorry, I have to add
that too.
Or the guys in the roster.
Yeah, you might have dodged a bullet.
No pun intended.
No, I didn't. At that time, no, I didn't really know that. So my senior year was Tim Tebow's senior year in high school.
Okay.
As well. Tim Tebow was committed to Florida. For me, it was the coaches. So, and shout out to Urban Meyer. He came on our show. He's great. At that time, I was not a big fan of the staff. Dan Mullen was a guy who was directly recruiting me. Dan Mullen, who I think he was at that point, he may have been a receiver coach or offensive coordinator, and he had kind of our area of recruiting. And Dan Mullen would text me every morning. What was the text? It would be, "If you're not a Gator, you're Gator bait," and that irritated me, bro. Like it just, like I didn't feel. I don't know. It's just something that small. It's just like irritated me. Like,
I mean, that sounds irritating. That sounds irritating.
It's weird. It's like, dude, I'm in high school, bro. Relax.
And then you start to contrast, right? I contrast with Coach Hazel, who's also a receiver coach in Ohio, but he came down, recruited. He was actually trying to recruit one of the receivers, but he's like, I'm not sure about this receiver, but I like this corner. And like his like our communication there was more uplifting. Like when I talked to the DB coach, it was more, hey, you should to improve your back pedal, you should do this, this, and this. And I got a season to play, so you give me some tips, and then I go on the field and I start picking off passes. Like that makes me want to go there, So just the approach was different. And all these coaches now, they're great guys, but that approach was different. And I felt more comfortable with the Ohio State staff than I did with Urban staff.
Man, that's so funny. When I think about recruiting, for me, I'm very similar. Your head football coach is if you're a steak and potatoes dude, they just have to be the steak. You got to have a good steak because they're the leader. At the end of the day, your position coach hierarchy-wise is going to answer to them. And culturally, it need to filter down right. But the reason he's so close to the position coach is because they all have regions. You think about Blake, for me, I got recruited by Bruce Chambers, who wasn't even a receivers coach. Now, clearly, I had a great relationship with, Coach Kennedy and the other guys that were involved. My recruiter at Oklahoma was Brent Venables, who's now the head coach, defensive coach at the time. So some schools give you regions that are areas that you're going to recruit hard. You have relationships in those areas. So yeah, you're going to know them in that process at the time. But Chim, Coach Brown had so much to do with why I chose Texas. And it's funny, man, because it really came down to Texas and Oklahoma for me, not being too far from home. My family could come see me, drive and come see me. Ironically, Oklahoma turned me off because when I went there, all they talked about was Texas. And I think I've told y'all that before.
I still do.
Oh, yeah, we don't do this like Texas. Oh, no. We don't do that. Like I'm sitting there going, dude, y'all beat them 5 years in a row. Why are y'all obsessed with them? I go to Texas and Coach Chambers like, hey, man, they've had our number. But that's about to change. That was the extent of what they said about Oklahoma. I told them I'm from the Waco area. So they're talking about Baylor. They're like, man, Baylor's been rough. You go there, you're going to be the only dude. And you're going to get knocked out every play. But they're going to get better. And they literally prophetically said Baylor will get better. And they eventually did in the Browse era with Griffin and all those. So that was crazy. So in the end of the day, they were worried about my development and them versus what I'm turned off of is talking bad about anybody else, even their biggest rivals, talking bad about anyone else. And even about A&M, the thing they said is like, hey, man, you're a small town dude. You want to come to the city? You want to go to the country? It actually makes sense if you want to stay at a small town, but we really, really want you. So recruiting's crazy, and it's different for everybody, right? You know, it's a little crazy things that I did, especially, and me being recruited twice. My recruiting at 18 was very different than my recruiting at 22, 23. And so it was, that whole process was just fascinating. So, man, you choose people you're going to trust, that you earn that trust over the years of being recruiting. Recruiting now is a whole nother monster. I mean, let's be real. You know, they claim legislatively you're not supposed to talk about money because you don't have a name, image, and likeness till you get on campus. But you're a damn fool if you think they're not talking money in that process. And so it's just those relationships. And clearly I still talk to Coach B, but Coach Kennedy just got a job at Rice. I know that. Coach, when I went to the hall at UT, Coach Chambers, who had a massive role on getting me there, came back to it. Coach Kennedy did. Coach Brown did. So it's cool. And Coach Tress, man, I actually was with him when he was that very, very, very small stint with the Colts. And he was cool as all get out, man. He talked about that game. He's like, I told her ass, they're worried about Shipley. You need to think about 6. And it was a funny conversation. I said, well, Coach, then why the hell did you send a 0 blitz?
Zero blitz.
And we just laughed about it. So Coach Tress was good people, man. It was a cool dude. And just talking to him after that game and in the process.
So that was Luke Fickell's call, the head coach at Wisconsin.
It was. That's a good point. I do remember that. Yep.
It's great.
And you know what? But it did work in the first half. He only did 0 blitz right before halftime too, and it worked. So, you know, but Colt was pretty good, and we had a plan for it the next time.
It's crazy. I was just looking to see kind of who your potential recruiters were, Chimdi, and I see like Luke Fickell as the defensive coordinator. You're talking about Venables. It's insane. Like the coaching trees in college football, but the road a lot of these guys take, and how long it could be before you really get your shot at a big program like they're getting shots at now. Like he's the head coach of Wisconsin. I think a lot of people forget once Jim Tressel left, he was the interim head coach at Ohio State before Urban Meyer got there. So, and then he had to go to Cincinnati because they're bringing in Urban. So it's always a long and winding road, I feel, for a lot of these guys. And maybe one of those guys is Coach Moore, who's now the head coach at Michigan, right? And he's taken over for Jim Harbaugh. And I think I read somewhere like he has something on his resume that a lot of these guys don't. And I think Michigan, with how long Harbaugh may have waited and like took the decision, they kind of maybe missed out on a Kalen DeBoer. He probably would have taken Bama nonetheless, but they maybe missed out on a Jed Fish from Arizona if they wanted to not go with internally. But it worked out for Ohio State. They went internally with Ryan Day, and he's had great success there. It worked out for the most part with Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley. So we've seen it work out in recent years where they go within and they take it. And Coach Moore also has something on his resume that a lot of these coaches didn't. He's beaten Ohio State as the head coach, quote unquote, because Jim Harbaugh wasn't technically on the field. Look, Chimdi, by the way, let me say this. I didn't say this at the beginning of the show. I grew up a diehard Buckeye fan. So my whole family gets together and we watch the game every year. And I'm not saying I was as pissed as you, but I was definitely very upset with the outcome of that game.
Did you break a TV? Did you break a TV in your home?
No, we were watching at my girlfriend. We were watching at my girlfriend's parents' house. It was a nice TV, and it was the first time they had my family over. Next year, if it happens again, we're sending someone through the TV and we're storming out. We're not apologizing. But where does Michigan go from here? Because they're defending champs. We both play them next year, right? They're our first tough opponent. You guys always end with them. Where do they go from here? They obviously shouldn't be taken lightly. And how do you guys get past them? And what advice, Chimdi, would you have for us to get past them?
Well, and to add on to that, y'all just had, we mentioned your show, Believe in Buckeyes, that you do with Bryant Browning, who played also in that game that we keep talking about, that Quan was in as well. There's an offensive lineman at Ohio State. And you guys had Pierre Woods on, who is a Michigan guy. Yeah. And he asked, I think late in the show, or you guys asked him, like, if y'all thought, or if he thought that they would be able to get back to the playoff this next year. And he said, undoubtedly, of course, as you would, you're repping your former squad. But Chimdi, you were kind of quiet at that point in the show, and I don't know, were you holding on to some things? Like
Toss is a man of observation.
I am. I get to watch their show closely all the time, and I know when he's got something to say, and I feel like he might have had something to say about the Wolverines at that time.
Yeah, so Pierre Woods is a friend, man. He's from Ohio. He's from Glenville. Went to the same high school as Troy Smith, Ted Ginn, a bunch of guys who played in the NFL out of Glenville. But he was like the first guy from Glenville to go to, well, really the first guy from Glenville to go like high level D1, playing the Big Ten. So he's almost like he's a friend, but he's also like I wanted to respect.
He's a bit of a legend.
His respect. So I didn't go crazy on the episode, but I do not feel the way he feels. And I could be wrong because I've been wrong about Michigan and Ohio State the last 3 years, right? But I think they're in a place right now where they have to figure it out. And Harbaugh built a good foundation. They're trying to keep that foundation, which is important because, you lose a coach and you lose a staff, you could lose a bunch of players, right? So they chose to go the route of stability, which I think is beneficial, but it's also risky because it's not Sharon Moore's foundation, right? And he has to continue it on. And then they lost a bunch of offensive linemen. Look, Michigan was a great football team. They have a great defense, probably the best defense in college football. But outside of their defense, I mean, their team is the offensive line, right? That is the offensive line. We saw it versus Penn State. Everybody says Michigan ran the ball 30 straight times because they were dominant. No, they ran the ball 30 straight times because that is their strength, is running the ball. They could have easily on the 3rd and 3 thrown a pass for a first down, but instead they chose to run it and they get 2 yards and they punt. They were comfortable with playing defense and running the ball. The offense, their head coach is an offensive line coach. He's an offensive lineman, I think maybe at Oklahoma or something back in the day. But he does not have the same offensive lineman that he had the year before. So I think there's going to be some attrition. I think they have some decommits. It's going to hurt them from the recruiting standpoint, which won't impact them as much next year. But, every year I think you get further and further away from that Harbaugh foundation. Now, they can do, he said 11-1 was what Pierre's prediction was. I'm closer to a 3-loss Michigan team next year. I don't think they beat Texas. I don't think they beat Ohio State.
Did they play Oregon?
I'm not sure if they play Oregon. I know they got USC and Washington.
USC, Oregon. They have all of them.
And they got Oregon. So,
I think they have one of the top 5 hardest schedules next year.
Yeah.
And you compare that to this past year where they really didn't play a football game until they got to Penn State, till they got to November, right? And, they were the national champion. They were the best team last year at the end. But the way college football is, these teams get better as the year goes on. And if you don't play somebody tough early, you're just working towards that November schedule, that, championship game and that playoff. And if you got somebody tough early, your season could look completely different if somebody knocks you off early.
Oh, and you think about that when you're playing Jay Brooks. We lost our number 1 running back. We lost, honestly, right now, the number 1 rated running back in the draft. And so when you're grinding, you're playing the Bamas of the in the early in the season, like they're going to have Texas next year, who's reloaded, probably honestly a better team next year than they had this year, per another year with O-line, which you were talking about. Michigan had and I think they're losing all 5.
Yep,
they moved all 5, a couple of running backs. I appreciate the bias of my man, but
they're number 1 wide receiver,
Patriots, baby.
Number 1 wide receiver too.
Yeah, they're losing a lot. And truth be told, I think Harbaugh did what he did on purpose so his boy could get the job. But I also think he hurt him in hindsight per them going out. And nobody's going to choose, Michigan even in the portal if you're not sure who your next coach is going to be. And so on one end, it was damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yeah, kudos. It worked out. Your boy got the job, but you may have set him up for failure because that's just what it is. I mean, like I said, what we got in the portal, what Ohio State got in the portal, we made our teams better and filled some gaps that we lost in the draft. with seniors and you name it. So I think they're gonna compete. They're a blue blood. That's what they do. They're gonna find their best way to reload to a certain degree. But yeah, they do have a very different schedule than they had last year. And so in the trenches, we're actually going to have a closer example of that O-line that they had last year, in my opinion. We're going to have 1, 2, for sure, 1 or 2 first-round picks and a couple of second, maybe even more. So I think they're going to have their hands full. And that's not me being biased. That's me taking what I saw in Tuscaloosa. Alabama was a damn good team, but we owned the lines of scrimmage. That's what it really boils down to in a lot of ways. If we had the Jay Brooks, we had an even better chance of beating Washington because Quinn was off in the first half. So it's so many factors in this game that I think works in our favor, works in Ohio State favor with the consistency of who we have in place. And unfortunately for a Michigan who – it's all good because they just won the Natty and they got some years to not even worry about it. Those shirts are going to sell for at least 10.
Yeah.
They can. I don't think it's going to be the same season. And I remember, I think Tosh, you said it earlier. Maybe the coach would have looked at Bama. Hell no, no coaching. I'm not sure what my man from Washington was thinking. You do not follow Saban. That man won 6 rings there.
Yeah,
6. Now, if you were the coach at Michigan that helped accomplish what you did this year, you get a lot more bandwidth because you were a part of that. Harbaugh did miss 6 games last year, but you were built different. You were one of the oldest teams in the country, like a Washington. And now the real is about to happen. And another conversation we had was the amount of turnover in coaches. They don't have much patience for coaches these days.
No.
At any level, even at
Michigan's never had it either.
Bro, Michigan's never had it.
They were calling for Harbaugh's head like 2 years ago.
Huh?
They were calling for Harbaugh's head
exactly.
like 2 years ago.
Hell, and the NFL level, they've changed every coordinator in the last 2 years on every single team. That blows my mind. But in the collegiate level, because of what they're getting paid, it's becoming that as well. So I tell you what, I hope he's very wrong, and I think he is going to be about that one loss piece of it. But it's going to be a fun thing, and I like it. As crazy as what we're going to in the 12-team playoff, I appreciate and like that Blue Bloods are still going at it week 2, week 3, and just making it a lot better product and a lot more fun for me who love the league, but I'm a college dude at heart, and I like to see it.
Are we predicting more or less tears from Sharon Moore on live TV this year?
Oh, he gonna be some tears. It ain't gonna be the same.
Oh no! It reminds me of Rodney Terry, honestly, a little bit. It gives me a little Rodney Terry vibes. I know with the different circumstances with him taking over for Chris Beard, but he inherited a great team, so I think he's inheriting a great situation. Well, we'll have to see if we can put it together on the field.
I think the comp is also accurate in certain ways when you look at the parallel, because we still don't know how his team and this university is going to be affected, right? Like it's not over yet with however things get ruled, and that could affect things in a different way. And hopefully it doesn't for him. And obviously Harbaugh knew exactly what he was doing. You know, Quan, like you're talking about.
Pete Carroll vibes too.
I get what you're trying to say, but basketball is just such a different sport, bro. And you're in the number 1 basketball conference in the country, where you have Houston at number 2, Kansas at number 3, Baylor at number 8. I mean, you literally have 3, 4, 5 other ranked top 15 teams that you're rolling against, and one and dones. It's just the O-line of Michigan. I don't know that you can compare that in a basketball way. And so I think I get what you're saying from a coaching standpoint and the inherent piece of it, but RT is in a lot harder situation in one way, but not so much in the other, because like Chairman said, they didn't really play anybody till Penn State. RT from the jump was playing top 5, top UConn, 10, Gonzaga in the mix. You know, he's going over to this school and that school. So I get what you're saying, but I think a little bit different.
Man, they really almost lost that Maryland game. They really did.
Who? UT?
Michigan. Just talking about that late schedule and just thinking about it in those games and how they got tested.
So annoying.
And Maryland was a solid team, right? But not by any stretch of the imagination close to what Michigan and of course what the Buckeyes were, and they were really close to winning that football game. And that happens, right? And
dude, that was the cool thing about college ball. Hell, everybody almost lost some game.
Yeah,
it was a lot of parity this year.
Us
and
too.
I don't know if that's a portal thing. I don't know if that's an NIL thing. There always has been, but it's why you needed to go to a 12-team playoff, because a selection committee they struggle bust a little bit trying to figure out this season because of those situations. It wasn't as easy and as clear as can be when and we all know what happened to Florida State. I don't think it was the wrong decision. I think it sucked for them, but it's just, it was a lot of those games where even the dudes who won the Natty, and they were the best team in my opinion because of what they had on both sides of the ball in the trenches. They had some close games on every level.
And Michigan almost losing is different than other teams almost losing, just because the way that their style of play is really old school Big Ten football, where the game really is going a blowout for Michigan is like they won by 2 touchdowns. Oh, they just blew them out because they don't have the high-powered offense. They're going to run the ball until something pops, and they're going to play defense. So they're always going to be in the game, but depending on what happens in that run game is going to determine, how close that game is. But it points to the fact that next year, if there is some, if they don't operate from an offensive line standpoint, from a run game standpoint, close to what they did this year, it could start to get ugly for them, right? Because they're not beating you in a bunch of different ways on offense, right? It's just like Ohio State, we really struggled in the run game early in the season. It doesn't matter. We'll just keep throwing the ball to Marvin Harrison until we figure out the run, right? That's not really Michigan's approach. They have to be great at run. They have to be great at defense. And now they can do what they have to do. So it really is going to come down to, we'll know early on, if they have some leakage when it comes to the run, it's going to be a completely different football team, which would be crazy.
And they have somebody coming in week 2 that's probably going to be top 3. So it's going to be a different ball game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch and see, and that's going to be a test, I think, for both sides. But like you said, I give the veteran, as crazy as it feels, because we haven't been in this position. Had a great season last year, but we haven't had kind of the more veteran team, especially in the trenches. And Jimmy, you said it's surprising that it took them so long to get back on. Well, 2 head coaches, that was some tough choices. But then we didn't value the lines of scrimmage, in my opinion, the way we probably needed to. We still had some dudes on the outside, but you can't get them to block. They're mute. And so I think it's going to be a real test with Texas in week 2, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of just hearing you talk about it, Chimdi, it just, I don't know, they kind of remind me of like maybe a second half of his career Floyd Mayweather kind of fighter, like a boxer that is just so technically savvy that'll just wear you down, and you'll always be in the fight's always going on because he's going to the 12th round. Yep. But you're not going to win the fight because he's a technician, and it's going to go to unanimous decision, and you're going to think you kind of have a shot, but you never really do. And that's the kind of the wear and tear kind of brand of football they play. Just have my wheels cooking. Hearing you talk about it.
Quan, do you give the stamp of approval to that cross sport analogy right there? As opposed to the college basketball NCAA one.
That was a better one. That was a better one.
I think it was
Thank you. I was trying.
I give him that. That was better.
I was trying. That was solid. I was trying. Look, man.
Well, and plus I'm sitting here in Austin, and by the way, you by no means did either one of y'all say anything bad about RT, but if you're in Austin, good Lord, man, they are beating my man up, and I'm sitting here going, bro, I get it on every level, but when you play the game, and I was at the Houston game, we end up losing the game in overtime, but that was the most physical they played all year, and I'm sitting there going, and what we know about coaches is that same dude coached them 4 weeks ago is the same dude that coached them that night. But for some reason, finally, they decided to turn it on. There, at some point, and especially in an era where you're getting broke off like crazy. I mean, these cats are coming out with 100K chains, and I ain't mad at them. Kudos, it is what it is. I think you take a little bit of that amateur status off, and you have to take some onus on yourself. I promise you, I love T. Hunt, but the consistency is just not there, and all the above. And so that's the only reason I had to have his back a little bit, because they're beating him down in Austin. And y'all know how our fan base can be. But I think he's going to have an overall better career. Clearly, we'll see what happens in Michigan in the football stakes. But I honestly think RT, with a few more years, is going to be fine, because he got the team early enough to recruit and do what he needed to do. The dude has the number 1 recruit in the nation coming next year, who was at that game, who only got even more fired up about it. So I appreciate the new comparison, but I think it's all gonna. I need him to back off and get his man time, because old boy from Houston took 10 years to get Houston where they are. Baylor's coach took 16 years to get them to win a natty, and that time is important, especially in that league.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even other guys in college football we've seen, like Sark, Urban Meyer, like it takes time to really get, and even Ryan Day gets time, even if you have some success, to get things rolling to a championship level. Chimdi, we're going to have to get you on one more time, maybe a couple more times, as much as you want, man. We love talking college ball. It was an absolute, anytime you want, man. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. We always ask everybody this. It's usually your favorite Longhorn memory on this show, but you're not a Longhorn. And so we'll cater it a little bit to you. What is your favorite college football memory from you playing, watching, anything your entire life?
Man, favorite college football memory is tough. So we had a Rose Bowl win against Oregon in that 2009-2010 season. This is coming off of my redshirt year, losing to Florida in the national championship, then coming back, losing to LSU in the national championship, then coming back, losing to Texas in the Fiesta Bowl. And then you started to think, like, we're just going to keep going to these big games and lose every year. And then we got Oregon, and they had the high-powered offense, right, the Chip Kelly offense. And we were supposed to be too slow to keep up with them. Right?
Was it Dennis Dixon? Was their quarterback?
Who was that?
Was it Dennis Dixon who was their quarterback?
No, they had
Was it Mariota?
It was Mariota.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had Mariota at quarterback.
Yeah,
wow.
I thought that was Mariota, because I think he won the Heisman the next year, and then they got beat down.
Got it.
At Jerry's World for the Natty, I think.
Yeah,
was that with like LaMichael James, like all the running, like
yeah,
or D'Anthony
they had LaMichael James. They had LeGarrette Blount on that team.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, they had it was Jeremiah Masoli was the quarterback.
Oh, Masoli.
Oh yeah.
The bridge. He was the bridge.
Yeah, because Mariota was 2012 and 13.
Yeah, I apologize, Mariota. Yeah, it was Masoli. Masoli he really had like a really big head, but I remember he'd run up the middle. And he was a pretty tough guy. But yeah, that was our first bowl game win. Got to celebrate out there in California. That was that whole week, from the win to the celebration after the win, to barely getting everybody on the plane the next day. That was probably my best college football memory, I would say.
That's awesome, man.
And it made me forget about losing to Texas in the Fiesta Bowl.
That was a fun game. I got one more question as we close. The Super Bowl is coming up. We got to talk about that. Damn, I mean, can you bet against Mahomes at this point?
It wouldn't be a good bet.
No, bro, it's so hard. Yeah. Like I want to say, because honestly, San Fran remind me a little bit of Michigan. Really good O-line, lean on that defense.
Yeah.
Nothing against Purdy. I'm actually.
Oh no, you're a Purdy hater.
Yeah, that's what happens, Quan. When you try and talk shit on Purdy, your mic gets muted. That's what happens.
We lost a Q. We lost a Q.
We can't hear you. But Chim, I do have a question though. Because
am I still lost?
Now we got you back. Chimdi, it seems as if there is a weak spot on this 49ers defense, that it could be at the corner position, in tandem with their edge rushers, like not being as productive as they should be, or as productive as we think how big of names they normally have been in their careers. Do you think that will be kind of the telltale sign of how Mahomes picks apart this defense? Because obviously across the middle, their linebacking core, two of the best in the league right now. Greenlaw and Warner are incredible.
Insane.
But I felt like Goff was able to win some matchups because of the receivers on the outside and what they were able to do. Do you feel like that's something that will tell?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's something. I just think the combination of Andy Reid and Mahomes is deadly.
And Taylor Swift.
They just got too much. You know what I'm saying? They just got too much ammo to be able to figure out how to win. In Kelsey, obviously. And they just figure out how to get the points that they need. For the 49ers, I mean, it's going to be tough. I am a fan of Brock Purdy. I know there's a lot of talk about him being a game manager versus him actually being productive. I honestly don't think that stuff matters. It's like he was the last pick in the draft. He's in year 2. What is it? Year 2 for him?
Yeah.
He's way ahead of schedule.
How about the fact that he's just a gamer? Like he just steps up and makes good plays. Like he's
way ahead of schedule as an NFL quarterback, being in year 2, and he's super effective. Imagine you hiring somebody for your business, and you don't. I just need somebody to manage everybody else, and they come in, and now you're performing way better than you were before, and you continue to be elite. You just hire the best manager that's out here. I mean, I don't care how you label him. I think, I think the 49ers for sure have a shot, but somebody's going to have to make a play defensively against Mahomes, and it's got to be getting pressure on them on one side, and then you got to force a turnover. You got to force something big that changes the game, and that's really good. That's really what it comes down to. Because if you don't, they're gonna beat you.
Done. Hook, line, and sink. I mean, like, he's just too dangerous. We're already talking about him being in the GOAT status. All right, we'll talk more football later. Q, we'll see you next time. We'll get a Super Bowl, maybe a little Super Bowl prediction from you next show. Chimdi, thank you so much for joining us. Fisher Desopoulos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider, Alex, Toss Me the Rock Desopoulos. Oh, I said it already. And the Quan Cosby, my apologies. Gets your horns up. Hook 'em. We'll see y'all next time.
Hey,